You'll need to remove it by Monday, or we'll have it towed and fined, Patricia said. Her voice clipped as she stepped around the burned-out Jeep, like it offended her shadow. Ash still clung to the air. The melted plastic on the front fender hissed when the wind hit it just right. The violation notice, bright, smug, and laminated, was already taped to my front door, fluttering like a taunt. You're aware, I said, keeping my voice calm, that arson is a felony, right? She blinked, for just a breath, then smiled, tight, condescending. There's no evidence of anything criminal, mister. Landry, you left a commercial vehicle in your driveway. That's the issue. If you've ever felt that surge of power when standing up to bullies, hit subscribe now. This showdown is about to become a masterclass in fighting back. I built this house with my brother. Before the HOA even existed, I said. That Jeep isn't just legal, it's family. And Patricia Carmichael had just declared war on it. I'm Michael Landry. I run a specialty Jeep restoration business, VIN authentic rebuilds, off-road tuning, pre-Title 75 restorations. People fly their rigs across state lines to have me document engine frames and trace emissions histories. But that Jeep, the black-on-gray CJ7 parked in my driveway, its hood scorched and soft top ruined, that was the last project my brother Jake and I built before he died in the rollover. He gave me the keys right before his deployment, said he wanted me to dial it in while he was away. He never came back. That's why I parked it here last night. Fresh from final tuning, its exhaust legal, its frame tagged and clean. Just wanted to see it at home, not the showroom, not the warehouse. Here, our driveway, our dream. Then it burned. And now the HOA, Patricia, calls it a violation. They didn't knock, didn't ask. Just posted a notice, cited a code I'd helped redline 3 years ago during the bylaw rewrite. I know every inch of that language. I helped write it to make sure classic cars wouldn't be targeted. And now, the woman who once asked me for a donation to the 4th of July BBQ wanted to tow the last thing my brother touched. Where are you watching from? Because this isn't a story about a car. It's about the people who think they can set rules, bend laws, and destroy memory, and walk away with a smirk. I didn't react the way she expected. No yelling, no argument, just quiet. Then I turned and walked up to the Jeep. The smell of burnt vinyl still clung to the air, but the VIN plate was intact. So was the modified sensor Jake and I embedded behind the glove box, a tracer tag tied to a server that still logs ignition events. It pinged last night. Not from the ignition, from external heat, which means the Jeep didn't catch fire. It was lit, on purpose. She didn't know that yet, but I did. And I wasn't the guy you picked a paperwork fight with. This wasn't the first time. I'd watched people try to take something they didn't earn. I spent 12 years documenting fraudulent insurance claims on antique VINs. I've seen frames swapped, fires faked, serials scraped and rewritten. But this fire wasn't faked. It was a message, a punishment. For what? Parking a vehicle outside the lines, not bending my neck when someone needed to feel taller, number. This was about power, HOA power, and Patricia's need to remind people that Stonebrook Ridge wasn't a democracy. I stepped around her and peeled the violation notice off my door, folded it, pocketed it. Then I looked her in the eye. The fire marshal will want to talk to you soon, I said. Stay reachable? Her expression didn't move, but her eyes tightened. She walked away without another word. Drop a like if you've ever wanted to stand up to unreasonable rules like this, and subscribe to see how this strategy plays out. I stood there, the breeze picking up the edge of ash from the driveway, carrying it down the cul-de-sac like confetti from a war no one wanted to name. That Jeep's going to be restored, but not just for me, for Jake, for every neighbor who stayed quiet, for every legacy someone tried to erase with a fine, a fire, or a fabricated rule. They picked the wrong driveway. I didn't sleep. The fire's chemical stink clung to the back of my throat, even after 3 showers. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jake, bent over the frame, covered in grease, tapping the tail light with the back of his knuckle to signal it was good. I'd built vehicles for NFL owners and NASA engineers. But that Jeep, that was the only one that ever really mattered. By morning, I wasn't angry. I was precise. At 8 a.m., I walked into the Stonebrook Ridge HOA office. They'd just opened. I'd timed it that way. The lobby had that artificial warmth that screamed forced hospitality. Green fake plant, granite counter too clean for real use, and soft jazz bleeding from overhead speakers like the music itself was apologizing. Patricia wasn't there, but her assistant was. "Morning," I said, nodding toward the familiar blonde behind the glass. Ashley, young, uncomfortable, already looking for a way to pretend she hadn't seen me. "I need to review the enforcement log for the past 6 months," I said, calm. "In accordance with Stonebrook's transparency policy, Section 3, subsection B." Ashley blinked, clearly stalling. I don't think we're supposed to." "It's a public record," I said, stepping closer, "and the fire marshal may be requesting it soon anyway." She didn't like that, but she didn't fight me. 10 minutes later, I sat with a printed stack of violation reports at a plastic conference table in the back. Names, dates, citations, and patterns. The same clause used on me, Article 7, Section 4, storage of commercial or modified vehicles, had been cited 8 times in 6 months. All 8 were against residents on the eastern perimeter. 4 of those properties faced Patricia's home directly. None of the vehicles had been towed. All had been moved voluntarily, until now. 2 had medical transport decals. 1 was a retired sheriff's cruiser converted into a personal vehicle. Another was a father's mobility van with a lift gate. And 1, the oldest citation, was for a woman named Lori Feynman. I knew her, widow. Her late husband had built a vintage military Jeep, parked it proudly in their carport since 1998, until the notice came. She moved it the same day. I remembered thinking at the time, Lori looked shaken. I thought maybe it was just grief, but now it looked like a test run, enforcement by intimidation, a quiet purge of anything that didn't fit Patricia's version of aesthetic purity. And me? I was the first one who didn't fold. I flipped to the digital log. The internal notes, sloppy as they were, told the real story. Lori F., approached by PC personally. Enforcement suggested, no follow-up needed. J. Mahoney, vehicle moved after HOA talk. Michael L., repeat non-compliance. Consider further steps. My Jeep burned, and Patricia already had the next move documented. I took a photo of that log. The truth wasn't just in what they did, it was who they didn't cite. 2 blocks over, 3 homes had service trucks. 1 with a trailer. I'd seen it. Big logo on the side. Power washing company. No citations logged, not even 1. And all 3 houses, friends of Patricia, I'd seen them at the HOA barbecue, laughing, toasting, standing around her like clients around a well-dressed consultant. It wasn't about rules, it was about control, and control thrives on silence. But I'd broken that. When I left the office, Ashley didn't say a word, just stared down at her keyboard like the fluorescent lights might swallow her whole. Outside, I called Lori. She sounded surprised to hear from me, grateful but hesitant, said she'd hoped someone would eventually ask. Then she told me something that made my jaw clench. "Patricia told me my Jeep reminded people of violence," she said. "She said it didn't align with the community's image goals. I didn't want trouble, so I moved it." She paused. "But your brother helped my husband restore that Jeep, Michael. Before either of you turned 20, I closed my eyes. Patricia didn't just target vehicles, she erased memories, silently, efficiently, and with just enough plausible deniability to keep the guilt off paper. But I had enough now to move. A pattern of uneven enforcement, emotional intimidation, selective application of power. That's the kind of thing city investigators do care about. They just need it framed right. And I've spent my entire career building cases in ways insurance investigators can't ignore. Next step, data, dates, images, conditions, correlations between citations, and proximity to Patricia's street. Because if she wanted this to be a war about appearances, I'd show her what real exposure looked like. She tried to burn a Jeep, but what she really did was ignite a reckoning. It was late afternoon when I spotted him. Mark Reynolds stood at the edge of the pocket park near the pavilion, clipboard in hand, his signature khaki HOA vest barely clinging to his shoulders. He wasn't walking house to house, just hovering. like he didn't want to be seen, yet didn't want to leave either. I watched him from the sidewalk. Mark had always struck me as someone who followed instructions because it was easier than asking questions. Mid-40s, clean-shaven, divorced, the kind of man who took up kayaking for the structure, not the thrill. He wasn't cruel, but he wasn't brave either, not yet. He didn't notice me until I was a few feet away. "Mark," I said. He turned too fast. His mouth opened, then closed. "Hey, Michael, I was just finishing the compliance packet for the West Side." His grip tightened on the clipboard, knuckles pale. That wasn't nervousness. That was guilt. I nodded toward the pavilion. "Sit a minute?" He hesitated, eyes scanning like a cornered man looking for a safer exit. But then, maybe out of exhaustion or something deeper, he nodded and followed. We sat across from each other on opposite sides of the picnic table. The sun was low. Shadows of the swings stretched long over the grass. A pair of kids rode bikes past us, shouting in bursts. Mark's eyes tracked them, grateful for the distraction. I broke the silence. "You know the Jeep that burned belonged to Jake, right?" He nodded slowly. "I remember from the deployment send-off barbecue. He built it with me. We finished it together the month he died." Mark didn't respond. I studied him. His fingers tapped the side of his clipboard, then stopped, then started again. He blinked too much for a man at rest. His shoulders hunched slightly, like he was trying to disappear into the bench. "I saw your name on the enforcement log," I said. "You signed off on the citation." After the fire, his breathing hitched. Barely, but enough. "I just logged the violations. Patricia assigns them," he said quickly. I'm not in charge of what gets posted." "She assigned Lori's violation too?" He didn't answer. A leaf floated down between us, brittle and dry, landing square in the center of the table. "I saw the logs," I continued. Every single vehicle cited under the commercial or modified clause faced her side of the neighborhood. Not one on the interior loop. Not even the ones with company trailers. Mark rubbed his thumb over his temple, like he could erase what I'd said. "You have to understand. Patricia's been president for 6 years. She knows how to keep things quiet. When people push back, she escalates. It's subtle, but you feel it." "You mean like burning a vehicle?" His head snapped up, eyes wide. "You don't think she—" "I think someone did," I said. And Patricia had already filed further action in my log before the fire even cooled. That's coordination. That's timing. Mark's gaze dropped again. "You're not in charge of enforcement," I said carefully. "But you are the only board member with access to internal memos. The only one I've never seen drink at her patio meetings." Silence stretched between us. Finally, he said, "You know why I joined the board? Because my wife used to say I never stood for anything. So after the divorce, I thought, maybe I could make things better here. Keep it fair. And is that what you've done?" His jaw clenched. "I didn't think it would get this far," he muttered. "But now, if I speak out, they'll cut me out. No one else will back me." I leaned in. "You don't need them. But someone burned my brother's Jeep. And you know damn well this HOA isn't playing by its own rules." He didn't argue. I stood. "I'm filing with the fire marshal," I said, "and with the insurer. But without someone who knows the board's pattern, its internal habits, I'm just a pissed-off guy with burn damage and a theory." He didn't look up, but his fingers stilled. "If I talk, they'll come after me." "They're coming anyway, Mark. Might as well make it count." As I walked away, I didn't look back, but I heard the unmistakable sound of a clipboard being set down. Soft, careful. Like a man deciding whether he still had a spine left. The notice was bigger this time, twice the size of the last, printed on thick, glossy cardstock, like they wanted it to be permanent. HOALETTERHEAD. REDINK. Terms like non-compliant vehicle, safety hazard, and imminent removal shouted from the top in all caps. I found it pinned to the bulletin board near the community pool, flapping in the humid wind like a threat that didn't care who saw it. The Jeep was officially marked for removal. "Vehicle will be towed by 5 p.m. Friday," it read, in accordance with Article 7 enforcement powers. This is the final notice. They didn't post it at my house this time. They wanted it public. The pool deck was full of neighbors, kids splashing, couples in loungers, retirees playing cards under the pergola. And now, right there on the corkboard, next to summer swim class schedules and lost cat flyers, they'd turned my brother's Jeep into a warning. I stood there, reading the notice in silence. I didn't tear it down. Let them see what this place was becoming. Patricia wasn't there, but her fingerprints were all over it. The format, the phrasing, the timing. She wanted eyes on it. She wanted witnesses. Not just to me failing, but to her control being absolute. If I flinched now, if I moved the Jeep, or begged for an exception, I'd be validating the whole system she'd built. But what Patricia didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I'd already submitted the preliminary packet to the fire marshal's office. The photos, the logs, the heat signature reports. I'd even included the metadata from the Jeep's tracer sensor. Ignition inactive, thermal spike detected from the passenger side. It wasn't proof of arson, not yet, but it was enough to raise flags. I'd also begun forwarding copies to my insurance company's Special Investigations Unit. And when a $40,000 antique restoration insured under a collector's policy goes up in flames, people notice. The Jeep was parked back at the side of my house now, under a temporary canopy, cordoned off by yellow tape I'd put up myself. I wasn't touching a damn thing until the investigators finished their site review, but Patricia didn't care about due process. She wanted a show of force, so she went after me publicly. That afternoon, I saw her across the pool deck, clipboard in hand, smiling like a queen inspecting her subjects. I walked up slowly. "Planning the parade already?" I asked. She turned, still wearing that performative pleasantness like a mask 2 seconds from cracking. "I'm surprised you haven't removed the vehicle yourself," she said, given the deadline. "It's under investigation." "By whom?" "Your insurance adjuster?" "No," I said. "The city fire marshal." That shook her. Not her expression, she was too good for that. But her hand stiffened on the clipboard. The corners of her smile froze just enough for me to see the truth underneath. "You're escalating this unnecessarily," she said. "No. You escalated it when you made it personal." She took a step closer. "You're letting sentiment cloud your judgment. This isn't about your brother. It's about property values. Wrong answer." "That Jeep isn't sentimental," I said. "It's registered under an antique class with a VIN-authenticated restoration tag. It passed every safety requirement. You're not going after a junker. You're targeting a legacy." Patricia's gaze narrowed. "The board has final say." "No, it doesn't. Not on criminal investigations, not on insurance claims, and not when selective enforcement can be proven." Her eyes flicked over my shoulder, probably checking who might be listening. 2 neighbors were within earshot, whispering, watching. "Be careful, Michael," she said softly. "You don't want to make this uglier than it already is." "I'm not the one who made it ugly." Then I walked past her. Back at the bulletin board, I took a picture of the notice, not to contest it, to preserve it. This was evidence, pattern, timeline, intent. I already had the original citation posted while the Jeep was still smoking. Now I had public escalation, before an investigation could even conclude. And that bulletin board? It was public access under community records policy. I'd already flagged the photo in my case file. This wasn't a violation. It was a gift. They'd written their threat in bold red ink, laminated it, and posted it in front of 30 witnesses. It would be the last weapon they ever fired that didn't backfire. The lab was colder than I expected. Concrete floors, metal racks, halogen lights that hummed above a workstation, covered in charred fragments. My fragments. The Jeep's passenger side panel sat warped and blistered on a tray in front of me, flanked by heat-scored bolts and the remnants of the soft top's metal latch. Nothing looked like it belonged to a legacy vehicle. It looked like wreckage from a war zone. "Start here," I said, pointing to the edge of the door hinge. The buckling's directional. Heat moved in, not out. Connor, the forensic tech assigned by the insurance carrier, leaned in. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, sharp-eyed, with the kind of energy people lose after 20 years of seeing things burn for a living. "You restored this yourself?" he asked. "Me and my brother." "Every bolt. I know what this thing looks like under its skin." He nodded and adjusted the angle of the panel under the inspection light. It was subtle, almost invisible under normal lighting. But the curvature of the melting told a different story than the HOA had tried to claim. Patricia had pushed the narrative of a self-starting vehicle fire, faulty wiring, a short from the dash. But there was no origin point near the battery tray, and the fuse box had remained untouched. Connor examined the char pattern. "You were right about the directional burn. See this?" He pointed to a tiny lip of distortion near the floorboard edge. "That's accelerant behavior. Something volatile hit from below. Burned upward fast and hot. I already knew that. But hearing it confirmed still hit me square in the chest." I stepped back, arms crossed, breathing steady. Connor moved to the sensor module we'd mounted behind the glove box, the one Jake and I had embedded years ago, still intact, still logging. "This thing's gold," he said, scrolling through the playback log on a portable screen. No engine spark. But at 2:12 a.m., it picked up a sudden spike. Temperature jumped by 400 degrees in under 3 seconds. "Point of ignition," I said. He nodded. "And it came from passenger side, outside in. Meaning, no short, no electrical fire, no internal fault. Somebody lit it." I stared down at the mangled frame rail resting on the lab table. Twisted, ugly, but not broken. The steel held up, even under a fire meant to destroy it. Jake always welded extra bracing along the lower frame. Not because he had to, because he believed in overbuilding everything that mattered. Even now it held. Connor looked up. "You mind if I loop in our field investigator? He'll want to start a formal claim with subrogation potential. That means legal action. That's why I brought it." Here he pulled out his phone and walked off to make the call. I stood alone in the sterile room, surrounded by smoke-stained metal and shattered vinyl. But I didn't feel small. I felt sharper, like something inside me had clicked into place the moment Connor confirmed what I already knew. They thought they could torch a memory and bury it under paperwork. But this Jeep was telling its story louder than any of them expected. I took out my phone and added the photos, sensor log, and accelerant report into the shared drive folder I'd created for the fire marshal. Everything was time-stamped, metadata intact. One clean folder, clearly labeled Jeep 7 Arson Package. The fire marshal's office hadn't responded yet beyond their automated intake confirmation. But I wasn't worried. This wasn't going away. Insurance companies don't ignore 6-figure vehicles with documented arson patterns. And city fire marshals don't overlook directional burns backed by sensor data. This wasn't about speculation anymore. This was about procedure, protocol, forensics. Patricia didn't just mess with the wrong guy. She messed with the wrong machine. Connor returned. "They'll open the file today. Expect contact within 48 hours. I nodded. "Good." I paused at the table one last time. One of the parts, the shift knob, had survived the heat. It had melted along one edge, but still carried the groove Jake had carved into it years ago. Barely a scratch, even now. I picked it up and slipped it into my jacket pocket. Not as evidence, as reminder. This was just the first strike. And now it was my turn. The fire marshal's field office didn't look like justice. It looked like a converted DMV, flickering fluorescents, beige walls, laminated safety posters from the late 90s. But behind the cluttered front counter, a woman in navy slacks and a badge that actually meant something called my name, like she already knew I wasn't here to waste her time. "Michael Landry," I stood. "That's me." She led me past a glass divider into a back room, where the walls were lined with half-charred evidence tags and close-up photographs of fire scenes. A digital board displayed active investigations. I caught a glimpse of the label, SRR 2147, pending civilian submission. That was mine. She didn't offer coffee. Good. I didn't want it. "I'm investigator Dana Cortez," she said, motioning toward a chair across from her desk. "You submitted the Jeep 7 report, correct?" "Yes." She folded her hands. "You're not law enforcement, but the packet you sent was professional, methodical, not typical of a civilian. I've spent the last 15 years documenting fraud for high-value vehicle claims. I see patterns faster than most, and you believe this was targeted arson. I know it was. And I've got directional burn evidence, sensor logs, and accelerant spread that proves it didn't start from inside the vehicle." She didn't flinch, didn't nod, just listened. I slid the shift knob across the table. This part was pulled from the wreckage, I said. Only one edge deformed. No warping on the underside, meaning the fire came from one direction. Focused, Dana picked it up, examined it. Her poker face was flawless. But when she set it down, she didn't dismiss me. "I've opened a case," she said. "We've got enough for an initial site visit. We'll dispatch a field unit to your property within the next 48 hours. Once the inspection confirms what you've submitted, we can file it formally with the city and loop in law enforcement if necessary." She paused. "Is there anyone you suspect specifically?" "Patricia Carmichael," I said without hesitation. HOA president. The fire occurred less than 24 hours after she issued a violation notice. During a board meeting, she scheduled to discuss enforcement optics. I've also documented selective targeting of homeowners whose properties fall within line of sight of hers. "You're saying this isn't about a vehicle?" "No, it's about control. The Jeep was just the opening shot," Dana scribbled notes. Her pen didn't stop moving. I exhaled, steadying my voice. "My brother built that Jeep with me. He died 6 months after we finished it. This isn't some hobby car. It's the only thing he left behind that still runs." She looked up at that. Not sympathy, something sharper. Professional gravity. "We'll do our part," she said. "You do yours. Keep everything untouched until we finish our assessment. You understand?" "I do." As I left the office, I passed a bulletin board pinned with fire cause categories. Accidental, electrical, natural, suspicious, intentional. I knew where mine would land. By the time I got home, the canopy over the Jeep was flapping in a gust of wind. The tape I'd wrapped around the perimeter had come loose at one corner, snapping with each gust like a warning flag. I re-secured it, then stood there in the silence of my yard, watching the sky shift into late afternoon gray. And that's when I saw the note. It had been slid under the canopy edge, plain paper, no envelope. I pulled it free with one gloved hand. No name, no signature. Just 4 words, scrawled in neat handwriting. "This is your warning." I stood still. No one in sight, no car idling nearby. Just the whisper of wind and the hollow quiet of a neighborhood pretending it didn't see anything. They weren't trying to intimidate me. They were trying to push me to fold. But this wasn't intimidation anymore. It was tampering with an active investigation. It was obstruction, possibly witness harassment, if I pushed hard enough through the right channels. I took a picture of the note, bagged it, and added it to the fire marshal's folder. Time-stamped, tagged, logged. This wasn't just about Jake's Jeep anymore. They'd crossed the line from fines and forms into physical threats. And if they thought that would break me, they didn't understand what it meant to build something with your bare hands, lose the person who built it with you, and then watch someone try to erase the only piece of them left behind. This wasn't a fight anymore. It was a reckoning. Mark's porch light flickered as I stepped up to the door. It was just past sunset. The sky was bruised with purple, and the last of the neighborhood sprinklers hissed somewhere behind me. A stack of compliance flyers sat on the patio bench, half distributed, half forgotten. He hadn't touched the last bundle. I didn't knock. I just stood there, watching through the screen door until his shadow moved into view. When he opened it, his face looked like it hadn't slept in 2 days. "You read it?" I asked. He nodded once. "I saw the bulletin board. I'm not talking about the violation. I'm talking about the escalation. The fire." The note. Mark hesitated. Then he opened the screen and stepped aside. "Come in." I didn't expect that. His living room was small, wood floors, shelves lined with neatly stacked HOA binders and board minutes like a shrine to order. But none of it matched his body language. He moved like a man trying to peel off a uniform he couldn't remember choosing. He walked to the table, pulled out a drawer, and handed me a sealed manila envelope. "I wasn't supposed to keep it," he said. I stared at it. "What is it?" "The pre-board memo from the night before the fire," he said. "Patricia emailed it only to voting members. I was CC'd by accident. She didn't realize I was still on the CC list from the last audit. She pulled it minutes later, but not before I downloaded it." I opened the flap. Inside, a printed email, time-stamped. Subject: Enforcement visibility. Exterior compliance expectations. It wasn't explicit. Patricia was too careful for that. But The phrasing was clear. Visible violations are a reflection of board weakness. Symbols of defiance must be addressed decisively. Vehicles remaining in non-conforming positions by end-of-week risk community perception. And then, Landry's Jeep remains an optics issue. She didn't need to say, burn it. The tone was clear. Mark poured himself a glass of water, but didn't drink it. I should have come sooner, he said quietly. But I kept telling myself it would pass. That she'd back down once you pushed, she didn't. No, he said. She won't. And after that memo, I started watching her more carefully. He moved to the bookshelf, reached behind a copy of the HOA bylaws, and pulled out a spiral-bound notepad. A surveillance log, handwritten entries, dates, times, observations. He flipped to the page from the night of the fire. Why write this down? I asked. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until it was too late. But when I saw the fire marshal open, the case file, I knew this couldn't stay buried. I looked at him. You're aware this makes you a material witness. I know. And if she finds out you gave me this, she will, he said. And I'm done running. I sat in silence, the envelope heavy in my lap. This was what I needed, not just suspicion, not just damage. This was internal correspondence paired with an eyewitness timeline, someone on the board no less. It could tie motive, power, and opportunity together, enough to justify subpoenas, enough to trigger agency-level heat, and enough for the fire marshal to escalate the case from probable arson to targeted criminal coordination. Mark finally sat down, the tension bleeding out of his frame. She used to be subtle, he muttered. Then she got confident. She got careless, I said. And you just gave me the fracture point. He leaned forward. Michael, burn her with it. Legally, I mean. I don't care what happens to me, but don't let her come out clean. I stood and gripped the envelope tight. You've done more than enough. Outside, the street was darker than usual. Porch lights flickered on, like stars reluctant to show their faces. The sprinkler behind his house had gone silent. In my jacket pocket, the sensor data. In my back seat, the lab report. And now, in my hand, the testimony of the only board member with a conscience. This wasn't evidence anymore. It was ignition. The next morning, I was waiting outside the county clerk's office before the doors unlocked. A red folder sat on my passenger seat, thick with printed screenshots, annotated logs, fire lab photos, and the envelope Mark had handed over. It wasn't a theory anymore. It was a system, a pattern of abuse with timestamps, witnesses, and motive, all wrapped in homeowner code enforcement language designed to conceal malice behind process. I didn't need to win an argument. I needed to build something no city official could ignore. At 9 a.m., sharp, the glass doors opened. I walked straight to the counter. The clerk on duty was a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with black-rimmed glasses and a stack of pens in her bun like ammunition. Records access request, I said. HOA Incorporation, Enforcement Authority, and Jurisdictional Boundaries. Stonebrook Ridge Association. She barely looked up. You the homeowner or legal rep? Homeowner. Here's my ID. Also requesting public hearing minutes from the zoning board. Last 3 years. Now she looked up. Zoning board? There's a claim that my vehicle violated community design standards. I want to see the original code overlays tied to enforcement capacity. She gave the faintest nod of approval. Not friendliness, respect. Then she typed with mechanical precision, her fingers clattering like a ticking clock. 10 minutes later, I was seated at a gray cubicle inside the records annex with a terminal login and a stack of folders I started digging. First, the HOA's Articles of Incorporation. Patricia had filed an amendment 2 years ago adjusting enforcement language, but the approval was pending ratification by the city council. It hadn't passed, which meant the version of enforcement she was using hadn't been codified. That was strike one. Next, the zoning overlays. Stonebrook Ridge fell within a shared jurisdictional zone. Certain powers, like forced vehicle removal, required co-authorization from the city's residential integrity officer. No record of that co-authorization existed in any of the files. Strike two. Then I found the kicker. A 2018 advisory opinion from the planning department. Temporary vehicle storage of vintage or non-commercial nature shall not be restricted unless posing immediate safety threat or visual obstruction from the street. My Jeep was parked off-street. Behind hedging, no obstruction, no safety hazard. Strike 3. I copied everything, every document, every advisory, every jurisdictional map. I highlighted each section, annotated them, and saved both digital and physical versions in my shared folder. Then I updated the file with timestamps and a new PDF summary labeled Municipal Conflict, HOA Overreach, Stonebrook Ridge. From there, I called Dana Cortez. She picked up on the second ring. Cortez, it's Landry. I've got the incorporation records and the enforcement jurisdiction flags. They never had the legal standing to tow, fine, or enforce the clause they used against me. That's useful, she said calmly. We'll incorporate it into the fire investigation context. It helps build the pattern of targeted harassment. I've also got a board member who can confirm the internal communication leading up to the fire. He gave me the memo and a time log. There was a pause. Then, good. That's very good. I'm compiling the packet now. I'll have a print version delivered by noon. I hung up and stepped outside. The sun was high now, slicing between the buildings in sharp lines. Everything felt brighter, cleaner, like I could finally see the edges of things. I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was building pressure, one layer at a time. I drove to a small print shop downtown and had the entire packet bound. 2 copies. One for the fire marshal, one for the insurer's legal team. Each page was labeled, ordered, and cross-referenced. Insurance policies, sensor logs, witness timeline, jurisdictional violations, unauthorized enforcement clauses. It wasn't just evidence. It was a fuse. Patricia hadn't just overstepped her authority. She'd weaponized the illusion of it. She assumed no one would check the filings, read the fine print, or walk into the records office armed with knowledge. But I did. Because that's what Jake would have done. We didn't just build vehicles, we built them to specification. And now, I was doing the same with my retaliation. One bolt at a time. The coffee shop was quiet except for the hiss of the espresso machine and the occasional click of a keyboard. I sat in the back corner, earbuds in but no music playing, head down over my laptop. The second binder copy, identical to the one I'd hand-delivered to Dana Cortez, sat next to my cup, untouched. I didn't need to open it. Every page was already etched into memory. I wasn't here to write. I was here to organize, to coordinate, to prepare. I opened a shared spreadsheet labeled Witness Synchronization, SRR2147. The columns were simple: name, address, violation, history, observation, contact status. Mark's name was already bolded. I'd just finished scheduling his phone call with the fire marshal's office. Not just as a witness, by now he was a whistleblower. His timeline, paired with that withdrawn email memo, had enough weight to turn a civil infraction into something closer to criminal negligence. Possibly more. But one voice wouldn't be enough. I needed a chorus, and that meant talking to neighbors who'd received similar treatment. Quiet warnings, vague threats, escalating citations. People who'd never said anything because they thought it was only happening to them. I'd started with Lori Feynman. She called me back this morning after I'd emailed her a screenshot of Patricia's optics memo. She called my husband's Jeep aggressive, Lori said over the phone, like a vehicle could have intent. She ever tell you to move it in writing? No, she replied. Always verbal, no paper trail. I asked for clarification once, and she said, if we have to document everything, we lose flexibility. I'd asked her if she'd talked to the fire marshal. She didn't hesitate. I kept his photos, she said, from the build, from the day we bought it. I never showed anyone, but I'll bring them. I marked her row confirmed and added a timestamp. Next was Jeremy Mahoney, retired paramedic. He used to park his emergency-labeled SUV on his own property until he got 3 fines in a week. No warnings, just notices with increasing penalties. When I reached out, he admitted he'd paid them all, out of fear. I didn't want the board digging deeper, he said. But you kept the violations? He laughed bitterly. I framed them. Just to remind myself not to trust people in polos and clipboards, he agreed to provide copies and speak on record. That made 3. By noon, I had 5 witnesses entered, 3 confirmed, 2 reviewing their records. I wasn't just building a case. I was establishing a pattern supported by first-hand narratives, consistent language, and timeline overlap. Every entry bolstered the argument that this wasn't just an incident. It was a playbook. Midway through organizing photos, I received an encrypted email link from the fire marshal's office. Inside, official case designation, SRR 2147, upgraded from suspicious to under criminal review. Attached was a preliminary site evaluation request for full forensic sweep. They'd be on my property in 2 days. That was the first domino. Next came a brief message from my insurance adjuster's legal team. We are opening subrogation proceedings pending confirmation of municipal liability. Please retain all visual evidence and correspondence liability. That word meant Patricia wasn't just dealing with a board complaint anymore. She was about to face city-level scrutiny and possible exposure to restitution. And it was all structured, legible, auditable. I opened the secure folder and ran a quick test of the visual archive. Photos of the Jeep's damage, fire angle analysis, close-ups of heat discoloration, Patricia's notices, HOA emails, photos of the bulletin board violation, Mark's handwritten timeline, the memo. I'd tagged every image with metadata, each one cross-referenced in the binder, everything built to withstand audit or deposition. That was the plan. Make it too clean to ignore, too neat to dismiss, too disciplined to label a dispute. Outside the window, a storm was forming. Slow, gathering in the distance, faint gray bleeding into the skyline. I didn't flinch. Jake once told me, you can't fight a storm head-on, but you can build for it. He wasn't wrong, and now everything was in place. By the time Patricia saw it coming, she'd already be under it. The chairs in the fire marshal's training facility were arranged in a half circle, like they were prepping us for a seminar instead of a site investigation. But this wasn't theory. This was the real thing. Dana Cortez stood at the front, clipboard in one hand, her tone clipped but calm as she briefed her team. Initial fire pattern analysis suggests deliberate ignition. Accelerant behavior is confirmed. Scene integrity preserved. We have corroborating witness testimony, internal HOA communications, and potential motive tied to selective enforcement. She turned to me. Mr. Landry will walk the scene, photograph everything again, and collect surface residue. We've logged your digital packet. We'll confirm all sensor data on site. I nodded. The scene's untouched since our last contact. Jeep's still under the canopy. Everything's bagged, sealed, labeled. Dana looked over her shoulder at the other 2 investigators. One carried a thermal imaging case, the other a vacuum pump for particulate lift. Then she looked back at me. This is your last chance to back out. I'm not backing out, I said. I'm doubling down. They arrived at my property just before noon. No sirens, no fuss. Just 2 marked city vehicles and quiet professionalism. Neighbors peeked through blinds, phones in hand, curious, nervous. I let them look, let them record. The inspectors moved methodically, photographing burn lines, mapping soil temperature gradients, checking fuel traces under the front axle. Inside the Jeep, the forensic tech used a portable scanner to recheck the sensor logs. Confirmed. A thermal spike at 2:12 a.m. External, not engine-sourced. Dana walked a wide circle around the vehicle. The directional pattern's consistent with what we've seen on industrial accelerant use. You said you've received threats? One handwritten note, I said, handing her the sealed bag. Found it under the tarp 2 days ago. She examined the envelope, then nodded to her team. Add it to evidence. Test for prints. DNA if possible. From across the street, Patricia stood near her mailbox, watching like she'd wandered into a crime scene and realized the outline might fit her. Mark saw her, too. He stood one driveway over, arms crossed, a legal pad tucked beneath his elbow. I'd asked him to be present, visibly. He didn't speak, didn't wave. He just stood there and let her see him. By 2 p.m., the fire marshal's team had packed their equipment and logged the chain of custody reports. Dana handed me a receipt confirming formal seizure of samples, note, and data logs. "Full report in 72 hours, she said. "But I'll tell you now, we've already got enough for a formal cause of origin designation." "You mean it's officially arson?" "Yes." She gave me one last look. "You understand what this means, right?" "I do." She didn't elaborate, didn't need to. When they pulled away, Mark walked across the lawn. "You think she'll show?" he asked. I looked at the calendar pinned behind my garage door window. "Board meetings in 2 days, open to the public. She won't expect this. She expects fear, compliance, maybe a lawsuit in a year or two. But not this." Mark's jaw tensed. "You want me to speak?" "Yes, just facts, timeline, memo. Leave out the emotion." He nodded slowly. "I've never done anything like this before." I looked at him. "Neither have I, but that hasn't stopped me yet." That night, I scanned and refiled the inspection documentation. The case number was official now, SRR 2147-FIRE. I uploaded the witness list, statement confirmations, and the HOA documents into one final archive, labeled Confrontation Prep, Public Meeting. 2 copies, one for the fire marshal, one for the community. This wasn't just about my Jeep anymore. It was about the kind of power people use when no one's watching, the kind that hides behind policy and pretends it isn't personal. Well, I was watching now, and so was the city. Patricia had 2 days left, and whether she walked into that meeting like a queen or a cornered animal didn't matter anymore. Either way, she'd be walking into the fire. The community clubhouse smelled like pine-scented floor polish and tension. Folding chairs lined both sides of the hall, arranged in neat rows facing a long table draped in the HOA's navy and gold banner. Patricia sat dead center, a pen in one hand, a stack of printed agendas in the other. Her smile was taut, lips tight, as neighbors filed in behind me. Mark was already there, seated on the end of the second row, legal pad balanced on his knee. He didn't look at her, didn't look at me either, just stared forward, jaw locked. The crowd was larger than usual, not the regular 5 or 6 bored homeowners who came to ask about pool hours or trash pickup. Tonight, the room was full. Lori Feynman sat near the back, Jeremy Mahoney too. Even Karen Lou, who once sided with Patricia on every vote, kept her arms crossed, eyes narrowed. They weren't here for discussion. They were here for a reckoning. Patricia opened the meeting with the usual formalities, approval of previous minutes, financials, committee updates. Her voice was smooth, unbothered. It didn't last. Next item, community vehicle compliance. She cleared her throat. "Recent efforts to maintain aesthetic standards have faced some unfortunate misunderstandings. I'd like to reaffirm the board's right to enforce regulations as outlined in..." "Point of order," I said, standing. Her eyes flicked up. "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a pattern of unlawful enforcement, followed by criminal retaliation." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Patricia's tone sharpened. "Mr. Landry, personal grievances are not part of this agenda." I held up the bound folder. "This is a compiled evidentiary packet submitted to the city fire marshal and currently under active review by their investigation unit. Case number SRR 2147-FIRE. I placed it on the table. "The Jeep that burned on my property wasn't an accident. And your violation notices weren't isolated. They were targeted. I have photos, logs, and forensic data that support arson, with motive tied directly to board actions you initiated." Patricia leaned back. "This is defamation." Mark stood up. Every head turned. His voice was steady. "On July 9th, I received a board memo sent to voting members titled Enforcement Visibility, Exterior Compliance Expectations. It included references to Mr. Landry's vehicle as an optics issue. That was less than 24 hours before the fire." Patricia's face didn't move, but her fingers curled around her pen until it cracked in half. Mark continued. "I also logged activity on the night of the incident, unauthorized vehicle movement near Patricia's home, and visual indicators of fire before ignition was reported. I submitted all of this to the fire marshal last week." Gasps echoed in the back of the room. Patricia's voice dropped low. "This is a coordinated smear." "No," Mark said. "This is the truth. And we've all watched you bend rules to fit your image of what this neighborhood should be. Karen Lou stood next. My son's wheelchair van was cited 3 times. I never said anything, but I should have. Patricia tried to recover. We are following documented regulations. You amended enforcement powers without final city ratification, I said. I confirmed that with the clerk's office. The towing authority you used against me was invalid silence, real silence, the kind that shifts weight in a room, the kind that clears illusions. I stepped forward. I've given everything to the fire marshal, including your memo, your patterns, the public notice you posted on the pool deck before the investigation even began. Patricia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. She glanced left. 2 board members wouldn't meet her eye. One leaned away slightly. Mark placed his notepad on the table. We need a vote of no confidence, tonight. And just like that, the room shifted. Neighbors leaned in, whispering, nodding. A man near the window said, "Seconded?" Patricia's voice cracked. "This isn't on the agenda." "It is now," Mark said. The crowd clapped once, then again. Then, all at once. No yelling. Just that rhythmic sound of hands slapping together as power shifted in the center of the room. Patricia stood, but this time, no one stood with her. 2 weeks later, the fire marshal's final report hit my inbox. I didn't open it right away. Instead, I poured coffee, stood by the kitchen window, and watched the sun push through the live oaks lining the cul-de-sac. A few neighbors were already out, Karen with her son's van, Jeremy walking his retriever, Mark Reynolds sweeping his porch with a kind of stillness I hadn't seen on him before. When I finally opened the PDF, I read the conclusion twice, just to be sure. Cause of fire, deliberate ignition. Accelerant identified. Commercial grade gel. Origin confirmed, passenger side wheel well. The language was clinical, but I understood what it meant. They were escalating to criminal referral. Patricia's name wasn't in the report. It didn't need to be. The documents, testimony, and photos we'd submitted were already with the city attorney. Dana Cortez had promised a full review of the HOA's leadership conduct, and in a strange twist of poetic symmetry, the insurance company, my insurance company, was preparing to file subrogation against Stonebrook Ridge's board for negligent governance. Patricia resigned before any of it became official. No press release, no final word. Just a 1-line email to the board and an empty chair the next time we met. But her shadow lingered until the Jeep returned. It took a month of restoration to undo the damage. New soft top, refabricated quarter panels, reconditioned wiring harnesses. But the shift knob stayed the same, melted edge and all. I parked it on the lawn of the clubhouse the night of the next open board meeting. This time, there were no laminated threats taped to my door, no sideways glances. Just quiet nods and neighbors filing inside with chairs in hand. Some for the meeting, some just to see the Jeep again. Mark sat beside me that evening. No clipboard, no blazer, just jeans and a voice that finally sounded like his own. "Didn't think she'd fold that fast," he said. "She didn't fold," I replied. "She just ran out of places to hide." We voted in new board members that night, more balanced, more accountable. I wasn't interested in running for a seat. I'd already spent my energy on something more permanent. I'd filed paperwork the day after the fire marshal's team closed the site. Not a lawsuit, not a police complaint, a petition to formally amend the HOA charter. No enforcement clause could be used unless confirmed by 2 outside authorities, either legal counsel or municipal code compliance. It passed, unanimously. The same board that once tried to burn my past had now ratified protections for every homeowner who came after me. And the Jeep, it stayed parked right in front of the clubhouse for the rest of the week, covered in a custom vinyl wrap with 1 line printed in metallic gray across the side panel. Built to last. That Sunday, I drove out to the ridge with the windows down. The old dirt path where Jake and I used to test suspension was overgrown now, but the ruts were still there. The kind you remember by feel, not sight. I parked at the top, engine ticking, frame humming like it remembered too. I didn't say anything. Didn't need to. Some things are louder in silence. Before I left, I reached into the glove box and pulled out the last violation notice. still crisp, still ridiculous. I folded it twice, lit a match, and let it burn on the gravel. No anger, no victory dance, just closure. If you want more stories of homeowners standing up to HOA tyranny, hit subscribe right now, share your story in the comments, and let me know where you're watching from. Because sometimes they come for your yard, sometimes they come for your Jeep, and sometimes they pick the wrong damn driveway.